I took US 101 north past Yachats, just before the light started going orange. The Harbor View Lodge sat about a quarter-mile off the highway down a cracked access road, wedged between the tree line and a stretch of rocky beach that didn't get much traffic. I'd driven past it maybe a dozen times without really noticing it. That's the kind of place it was. My phone buzzed in the cup holder. I didn't look. I already knew it was Mom calling to tell me Stephanie Maldonado had left another message. That made 6 days in a row. Same voice every time. Calm and smooth and completely unbothered. Professional. She worked collections for a payday loan office in Eugene, and she had this way of saying my mom's name that made it sound like she was reading off a grocery list. Jean Ruiz. We've been trying to reach Jean Ruiz regarding an outstanding balance. The outstanding balance was $1,100, which might as well have been $11,000. Mom took the loan out in March to cover the gap between her last temp contract ending and the next one starting. That gap turned into 2 months, then 3. Stephanie started calling in June. I figured if I could get enough hours at the lodge, I could at least take the edge off. Maybe get Stephanie to stop calling. That was the idea anyway. The parking lot had 6 spaces and only 1 car in it when I pulled in. A white sedan, older model, streaked with salt and dirt. The lodge itself was 2 stories. Wood siding that used to be blue but had faded into something closer to gray. The sign out front said Harbor View in peeling letters, and underneath that, vacancy. The second word was always lit. I grabbed my jacket from the passenger seat and got out. The wind off the water hit me right away, cold and damp and tasting like kelp. I could hear the surf from where I stood, a low, constant roll that didn't quite cover the creaking from the lodge's weathered frame. The front door wasn't locked. I pushed it open and stepped into a small lobby that smelled like old carpet and pine sol. There was a desk directly ahead, a couple of chairs that didn't match, and a vending machine in the corner that buzzed loud enough to hear from across the room. The lighting was yellow and dim, the kind that made everything look a little sick. A woman stood behind the desk. She looked up when I walked in, didn't smile. "Blake Ruiz," I said. She nodded once. "Dorothy Long, you're early." Figured I should be. She was maybe 40, auburn hair pulled back tight, wearing a button-up shirt with the sleeves rolled to her elbows. Her name tag was clipped to her collar, slightly crooked. She had the look of someone who'd been doing the same job for a long time and had stopped caring whether anyone appreciated it. "ID," she said. I pulled out my wallet and handed over my driver's license. She glanced at it, wrote something down on a clipboard, then slid it back across the desk. "You worked a front desk before?" "No. Doesn't matter. There's not much to it here." She turned and gestured to the monitor beside her, a boxy old thing with a greenish tint to the screen. It showed 4 camera feeds, each one grainy and washed out. Hallway, parking lot, side entrance, stairwell. Security system. Doesn't record, just shows live. You check it every hour or so. Make sure nobody's where they shouldn't be. "Okay. Register's here." She tapped the ancient cash register next to the monitor. "We don't get many walk-ins at night, but if we do, rates $65 a night. Cash only. No exceptions. You write their name and room number in this." She pulled out a spiral notebook, half the pages already filled with cramped handwriting. "Don't let anyone check in without ID. Don't let anyone in who's clearly messed up. Use your judgment." I nodded. My judgment wasn't great, but I didn't say that. She opened a drawer under the desk and pulled out a laminated card, about the size of an index card, covered in small printed text. She slid it across the counter toward me. I didn't pick it up yet. "House rules," she said. "Read it. Follow it. Job stays easy if you do." I glanced down at the card. The text was single-spaced, numbered 1 through 12. I caught a few phrases. Quiet hours begin at 10 p.m. Do not enter guest rooms unless requested. No exceptions. That's when I noticed the tide chart taped to the wall beside the monitor. It was printed on plain paper, curling at the edges, with a grid of times and heights. Someone had gone through with a thick black marker and circled specific times. High tide, low tide. I wasn't sure why a lodge would need that, but I didn't ask. "You lose that card, you're done," Dorothy said. She wasn't looking at me anymore, just straightening papers on the desk. Edward's particular about it. Edward? My brother. Owns the place. She said it flat, like she was stating a fact she'd repeated too many times. You won't see him much. He doesn't come in unless something's broken. Got it. She bent down and came back up with a small can, the kind you'd find at a hardware store. Drywall screws. She set it on the desk between us with a dull metallic sound. "Keep this behind the desk," she said. "Guests ask for screws sometimes. Picture frames, luggage, whatever. You hand them 3 or 4, no more. Don't let the can out of your sight and don't lose it." I stared at the can. It was beat up, dented on one side, with a label that was half scraped off. "Okay. I'm serious. You lose it, that's a problem. I won't lose it." She held my eyes for a second, then nodded. "Your shift's 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., weeknights only for now. If it works out, we'll add weekends. You get $200 a week, cash, paid Fridays. No taxes, no paperwork. That work for you?" $200 wasn't much, but it was fast and it was quiet. "Yeah." "Good." She grabbed her jacket from the back of the chair and shrugged it on. "Lock the front door at 11. Don't open it after that unless it's an emergency. Phone's under the desk if you need it, but cell service is trash here, so don't count on it. Questions?" I had about a dozen, but none I could put into words yet. "No." "Then you're set." She walked past me toward the door, keys jingling in her hand. She paused with her hand on the handle and looked back. "Respect the building, Blake. It's been here longer than either of us." I didn't know what to say to that, so I just nodded. She left. I heard her car start up outside, gravel crunching under the tires as she pulled out of the lot. Then it was just the wind, the surf, and the hum of the vending machine. I stood there behind the desk with the laminated card in front of me, the can of screws beside the register, and the tide chart on the wall marking times I didn't understand yet. The lodge was quiet in a way that felt too big for the building. After Dorothy left, I picked up the laminated card again. The edges were soft, not worn exactly, but rounded in a way that made me think people had been handling it for a long time. I tilted it under the yellow overhead light and read through the list. Rule 1. Quiet hours begin at 10 p.m. Rule 2. Do not enter guest rooms unless requested. Rule 3. Never open room 11. I stopped there, read it again. Never open room 11. Not room 11 is under renovation or room 11 is unavailable. Just never open it. Rule 4. If the lobby phone rings once after 1:40 a.m., unplug it immediately. Rule 5. Wet sand must be swept into the mop sink and rinsed with cold water only. Rule 6. Remain behind the desk from 2:12 to 2:26 a.m. Do not leave for any reason. Watch the tide chart. Rule 7. If a guest requests screws, provide exactly 7. I set the card down, picked it up again. The whole thing felt like someone messing with me. That was my first thought. Dorothy had this dry way of talking, and maybe her brother Edward was the kind of guy who thought it was funny to freak out new hires. Make up a bunch of weird rules, see how long it takes before the night clerk calls asking what's real and what's not. But some of the details didn't fit that. I brought the card closer. The laminate had a faint smell. Mildew, I think, and salt. The kind of smell you get from things that sit in damp coastal air for years. The text itself was typed, probably on an old typewriter because the letters weren't quite even. The number 6 in Rule 6 sat a little higher than the rest of the line. I looked up at the keyboard on the wall behind the desk. 12 hooks, each with a number stamped on a small metal tag above it. Rooms 1 through 12. Most of the hooks were empty. A few had keys hanging from them, the old-fashioned kind with actual metal teeth and plastic diamond-shaped tags. Room 11's hook was empty. That made sense if the room was off limits. But the thing that got me was the hook itself. It was worn smooth. The metal had this dull shine, the kind you see on handrails or door handles that people touch every single day for years. If no one was supposed to open room 11, why did the hook look like that? I set the card on the desk next to the register, rubbed my eyes. Probably I was overthinking it. Dorothy had been serious about the screws too, and that was just about keeping track of supplies. Maybe Rule 3 was the same thing. Maybe room 11 had a busted lock or a mold problem and Edward didn't want to deal with liability. Still felt weird, though. I glanced at the tide chart. The time circled in marker didn't mean anything to me yet. High tide at 2:18 a.m., low tide at 8:36 a.m. I'd grown up on the coast, but I'd never worked a job where tide schedules mattered. The clock on the wall above the monitor said 9:53. 7 minutes until my shift officially started. The night began normal enough. The vending machine kept humming. It was one of those sounds that disappeared after a while. But every few minutes I'd notice it again, and it'd bug me for a second before fading back out. The surf was audible through the walls. Not loud, just present. A low repetitive wash that made the whole building feel like it was breathing. I checked the monitor. 4 feeds, all grainy and washed out in night vision green. Top left, the parking lot. My car and the white sedan Dorothy mentioned. No movement. Top right, the side entrance. A steel door with a push bar, some kind of faded warning sticker I couldn't read on the feed. Bottom left, the hallway. Narrow, bad lighting, doors on both sides. I counted 6 visible. The angle didn't show the far end, bottom right. The stairwell. Concrete steps, metal railing, nothing else. I was supposed to check these every hour. I figured I'd probably check them more often than that just because there wasn't much else to do. The front door was still unlocked. Dorothy said to lock it at 11. I had the key on the desk, a brass thing on a retractable chain. I opened the spiral notebook and flipped through the pages. Entries going back months, maybe longer. Names, room numbers, dates. The handwriting changed every dozen pages or so. Different clerks, I guess. Some of the entries were just names. Others had notes. Jillian Morse, room 8, no car. Peter Stat, room 3, paid for 2 nights, left after 1. L. Vickers, room 6, asked about the rocks. I didn't know what that last one meant. 10:12. Nothing happening. I leaned back in the chair. It creaked. The building creaked back. The first call came at 10:41. The phone was one of those old beige desk models with a curly cord. It rang loud, rattling in its cradle. I picked it up. "Front desk," I said. "Yeah. Hi," a man's voice, annoyed already. "This is room 6. The mattress in here is like sleeping on plywood." I grabbed a pen. "I'm sorry about that. I can see if we have... And the walls are thin. I can hear everything. The people upstairs sound like they're moving furniture." I glanced at the monitor. The hallway feed didn't show movement. "I'll make a note. Is there anything I can... Can you bring up some extra blankets? Maybe that'll help." "Sure, I can do that. Thanks." He hung up. I wrote it in the notebook. Miguel Buck, room 6, complained about mattress and noise, requested extra blankets. I didn't actually know his name yet, but the register from earlier in the day had it. I checked. Miguel and Amy Buck, room 6, checked in at 4:30 p.m. I found blankets in a narrow closet behind the desk. They smelled like detergent and something else. Maybe the same mildew salt smell as the laminated card. I folded 2 over my arm and headed for the stairs. Room 6 was on the first floor, 3 doors down from the stairwell. I knocked. Miguel Buck opened the door. 30-something, sandy blonde hair, shorts, and a hoodie. He looked tired. "Here you go." I said. He took the blankets. Didn't say thanks, just nodded and closed the door. I went back downstairs. The second call came at 11:18. Same guy. The blankets didn't help, Miguel said. I can still hear people walking around up there. Is there another room we can switch to? I checked the keyboard. 4 keys hanging. Rooms 2, 5, 9, and 12 available. I've got a couple options, I said. Room 5's on the same floor, farther from the stairs, or room 9's upstairs, corner spot. What about room 2? That's available too. We'll take that. Okay, I'll bring the key up. I logged the room change in the notebook, grabbed the key for room 2, and climbed the stairs again. Miguel was already standing in the hallway with a duffel bag when I got there. A woman stood next to him. Amy, I assumed. Long chestnut hair, athleisure clothes, tired eyes. She didn't say anything. I handed over the key. Room 2's the first door on the left when you come in the side entrance. Should be quieter. Thanks, Miguel said. Still sounded annoyed. They walked past me toward the stairs. Third call at 11:59. It's still loud, Miguel said. I don't know what's going on, but we can't sleep. I checked the monitor. The hallway feed showed nothing. No movement upstairs. I'm not seeing anyone in the halls right now, I said. It might be the building settling. It's pretty old. It's not settling. It's footsteps. I didn't know what to tell him. I can offer a partial refund if we're staying. Just, can you check upstairs? Make sure no one's stomping around? Sure, I'll take a look. I hung up. Wrote it down. Miguel Buck called again, 11:59 p.m., complained about noise, requested check of upper floor. I locked the front door first. It was past 11. Then I went upstairs. The hallway was empty, quiet except for the surf outside and the buzz from a light fixture halfway down. I walked the length of it, listening at each door. Nothing. Rooms 1, 3, 4, 7, 8, 10, all silent. Room 11 was at the far end on the left. The door looked the same as the others. Same wood, same tarnished number plate. I stopped in front of it but didn't touch the handle. Never opened room 11. I stood there for a second. Then I turned around and went back downstairs. I called room 2 from the desk phone. Miguel picked up on the first ring. I checked, I said. No one's up there. All the rooms are quiet. Silence on the other end. Then, okay. If it keeps up, let me know. He hung up. I wrote that down too. Logged the time, the outcome. Dorothy said to document everything, so that's what I did. The clock above the monitor said 12:23 a.m. I sat back in the chair. The building creaked. The vending machine hummed. I kept thinking about my mom. She'd be asleep by now, probably. She went to bed early most nights because she got up at 5:30 for her temp shifts when she had them. But sometimes when I called late, she'd still be awake, sitting at the kitchen table with her phone in front of her, staring at it. Stephanie Maldonado's name on the screen. Mom never answered. Just let it ring. Let it go to voicemail. Then she'd play the message, and her face would do this thing where it got really still and tired all at once. I took this job so she wouldn't have to do that anymore. $1,100. That was it. Didn't sound like much when you said it out loud, but it was enough to keep Stephanie calling 6 days in a row. Enough to make my mom stop sleeping right. $200 a week, cash. 5.5 weeks if I didn't spend any of it, and I wouldn't. I pulled the laminated card toward me again. Reread Rule 6. Remain behind the desk from 2:12 to 2:26 A. The phone rang at 1:41 a.m. Just once. A sharp, old-fashioned bell sound that cut through the hum of the vending machine and the distant surf. Then it stopped. I froze behind the desk, my hand halfway to the spiral notebook where I'd been writing the time, 1:38, and the note, building quiet, no calls since 12:47. The phone sat silent under the desk. I could see the cord snaking down from the ancient beige handset mounted on the wall behind me. disappearing into the gap between the desk and the baseboard. 1 ring. After 1:40 a.m. I grabbed the laminated card and found Rule 4. The text was smudged there, the letters slightly fainter than the others, probably from people touching that exact spot over and over. If the lobby phone rings once and stops after 1:40 a.m., unplug it immediately. Do not answer. Do not plug it back in until your shift ends. My heart kicked up. I shoved the chair back and dropped to my knees, fumbling under the desk. The space smelled like dust and something sour I didn't want to identify. The phone cord ran along the baseboard to an outlet near the back corner, sharing space with the monitor's power strip. I grabbed the plug and yanked. It came out clean, no resistance, and the second it did, the whole lobby changed. Not visually. Nothing looked different. But the air went flat, muted, like I just put on a pair of those noise-canceling headphones my mom borrowed once from a coworker, except I could still hear everything. The vending machine, the wind outside, my own breathing. It just felt compressed. Closer. The pressure in my ears shifted, the way it does when you're driving up into the hills and your jaw starts to ache. I stayed on my knees for a few seconds, holding the plug, staring at the wall. Then I stood up slowly and set the plug on the desk where I could see it. Proof I'd done it. Proof I'd followed the rule. The clock read 1:42. I sat back down and pulled the monitor closer. 4 feeds, same as before. Parking lot. My car. Dorothy's white sedan gone now. I'd watched her pull out hours ago. Side entrance. Steel door. Closed. The push bar casting a shadow from the exterior light. Stairwell. Empty concrete steps. Hallway. Narrow and badly lit. 6 doors visible. No movement. I switched back to the parking lot feed. There was someone standing near the dumpster. My stomach dropped. They were facing the building. Facing the lobby doors, actually. Almost dead on. The camera angle was high and slightly off-center, so I couldn't see their face clearly, just the shape of a person. But I could see enough. They were soaked. Not damp, not rain-speckled, completely drenched, clothes plastered tight to their body, everything dark with water. Their skin, arms, neck, maybe their face, shined under the parking lot lights, slick and reflective. They weren't moving. Just standing there, maybe 10 feet from the dumpster, 20 feet from the front doors. I leaned closer to the monitor, squinting at the grainy feed. The person's arms hung at their sides. Their head was tilted slightly, but I couldn't tell if they were looking at the doors or just staring blankly in that direction. The lot lights made everything harsh and washed out, shadows pooling weird around their feet. Around their feet, I looked closer. There was a puddle forming, a small dark circle spreading out from where they stood, wider than it should have been for runoff from wet clothes. I checked the time, 1:44. The figure didn't move. I pulled the laminated card over again and scanned the rules. Nothing about people in the parking lot. Nothing about soaked strangers standing outside at 1:44 in the morning staring at the building. But the phone had rung once, and I'd unplugged it, and now this. I kept my eyes on the monitor. The person stayed still, didn't step forward, didn't step back, just stood there dripping under the lights. I checked the other feeds. Hallway, empty. Stairwell, empty. Side entrance closed, back to the parking lot, still there. My hands felt cold. I rubbed them together and glanced at the front door. Locked. I'd locked it at 11, just like Dorothy said. The deadbolt was turned, the little brass knob horizontal. The figure on the monitor didn't move. I watched for another minute, maybe 2. The clock ticked over to 1:46. The vending machine hummed. The building creaked somewhere upstairs, just the frame settling. Then the phone on the desk rang. Not the lobby phone. That one was unplugged, the cord sitting right there in front of me. The room phone. The intercom system that connected the desk to the guest rooms. I grabbed it on the second ring. "Front desk," I said. My voice came out steady. That surprised me. "Yeah, hi." Miguel Buck. He sounded annoyed, but also tired now. Worn down. "Sorry to call again, but there's a problem with the bathroom." I exhaled. Something normal. Something I could fix. "What's the problem?" "The vent's leaking or dripping. I don't know. There's water and it's getting on the floor and I just..." He paused. "Can you come check it? I don't want it to flood or whatever." "Yeah," I said. "I'll be right there." He hung up. I checked the monitor one more time. The parking lot feed showed my car, the empty spaces, the dumpster, no person, no puddle, just empty pavement under the lights. I stared at the screen, rewound what I'd seen in my head, the soaked figure, the water pooling at their feet, the stillness. Gone. I pushed the chair back and stood up. My legs felt shaky, but I ignored it. I grabbed 2 towels from the closet behind the desk, the same closet I'd pulled the blankets from earlier, and headed for the stairs. The stairwell was cold, colder than it should have been. I climbed quickly, the metal railing icy under my palm, and hit the 2nd floor hallway at 1:49 a.m. Room 6 was 4th on the right. I knocked twice, quiet enough not to wake anyone else. Miguel opened the door almost immediately. He looked worse than before. Hair messed up, eyes a little red, still dressed in the same hoodie and shorts. He stepped aside without a word, and I went in. The room smelled like cheap soap and damp fabric. The bed was unmade, covers half on the floor. A duffel bag sat open near the bathroom door, clothes spilling out. "It's in there," Miguel said, pointing. I stepped into the bathroom, small, outdated, tile yellowed with age. Sink, toilet, narrow shower with a plastic curtain pulled half closed. The vent was above the toilet, a square metal grate screwed into the ceiling. I looked up at it. Dry, completely dry. No water, no drips, no condensation. I reached up and touched the grate. Cool metal, bone dry. "I don't see any leak," I said. "It was dripping before," Miguel said from the doorway. He sounded defensive. "I'm not making it up." "I believe you," I said. And I did, actually. "But it's dry now. Maybe it stopped." He didn't respond. I stepped back, scanning the rest of the bathroom for damage. That's when I saw it. A ring of sand around the base of the toilet. Perfectly round, neat. Like someone had poured it carefully, measured it out to make an exact circle maybe 6 inches from the porcelain on all sides. Wet sand, dark and compact, the grains tight together. I crouched down. The sand was damp but not soaking. It didn't look tracked in, no footprints, no scattered grains leading to the door or the shower. Just the ring, precise and deliberate. My mouth went dry. "Did you..." I stopped. "Did you see this before?" "See what?" Miguel leaned in, looked down. "Oh, that. Yeah, I thought maybe it came from the vent, I don't know." I didn't answer. I stood up and looked at the vent again. Dry. No sand, no debris, nothing. Rule 5. If you find wet sand inside the building, sweep it carefully into the mop sink in the service closet and rinse with cold water only. Do not use hot water. Do not let it sit. I turned to Miguel. "I'll clean this up, it's fine." "Okay." He backed out of the doorway. "Thanks." I went back downstairs and grabbed the dustpan and small broom from the closet. The service closet was next to the side entrance, a narrow space that smelled like bleach and rust. The mop sink was steel, stained brown along the bottom with a single cold water tap and a pull-chain drain stopper. I carried the dustpan and broom back upstairs. Miguel had closed the door to room 6 but left it unlocked. I knocked once, pushed it open, and went straight to the bathroom. The sand was still there. Same neat ring, same damp texture. I crouched again and started sweeping, slowly, carefully. The grains slid into the dustpan easily, almost too easily. clumping together in tight clusters instead of scattering. I swept the whole ring into the pan. Took maybe 30 seconds. The circle had been perfect, but it broke apart clean. No residue left on the tile. When I was done, the floor looked untouched. No stain, no grit, nothing. Miguel was sitting on the edge of the bed when I came out. He didn't say anything. I nodded at him and left, pulling the door shut behind me. The hallway was quiet. I checked my phone. 1:56 a.m. I had 16 minutes before 2:12, before Rule 6 kicked in and I had to be behind the desk watching the tide chart. I took the stairs quickly, the dustpan balanced in one hand, broom in the other. The sand shifted slightly as I moved, sliding toward the front edge of the pan, but not spilling. It felt heavier than it should have been, not by much, just enough to notice. The service closet was still dark when I pushed the door open with my shoulder. I fumbled for the pull string light, found it, yanked. The bulb flickered on, dim and yellow, buzzing faintly. The mop sink sat low against the back wall. I set the broom down and stepped up to the edge, holding the dustpan over the basin. Cold water only. I reached for the tap and turned it. The pipes clanked somewhere in the wall. Then water came out in a steady stream, icy and clear. I held the dustpan under it and tilted. The sand slid out. Fast. Too fast. It didn't tumble or scatter the way wet sand should. It moved all at once, smooth and fluid, pouring into the basin in a single dark mass. The water hit it, and for a second the sand swirled, grains catching the light. Then it dropped. Straight down the drain, no hesitation, no clumping around the edges or catching on the metal grate. Just gone, like something below had reached up and pulled it. I stood there, staring at the empty basin. The water kept running, splashing against the steel, circling the drain. I turned the tap off. Silence. Just the buzz of the light and my own breathing. I rinsed the dustpan under the tap, checked it for leftover grains. Clean. I set it down and dried my hands on my jeans. The clock on my phone read 1:59. I grabbed the broom, flicked off the light, and headed back to the desk. The lobby looked the same. Monitor still on. 4 feeds cycling. Parking lot empty. Hallway empty. The unplugged phone cord sat on the desk where I'd left it. I sat down and pulled the laminated card close. Rule 4, unplug the phone. Done. Rule 5, sweep the sand, rinse with cold water. Done. Rule 6, stay behind the desk from 2:12 to 2:26 a.m. and watch the tide chart. I looked at the tide chart taped beside the monitor. High tide at 2:18 a.m., circled in thick black marker. 6 minutes from now. I leaned back in the chair. My hands still felt cold. I rubbed them together again, then shoved them in my hoodie pocket. The card wasn't a prank. I'd thought maybe it was. Dorothy's brother messing with new hires, seeing who'd follow the rules and who'd blow them off. But the phone had rung once at 1:41. The soaked figure had been standing in the parking lot, real enough to leave a puddle on the monitor feed. The sand had been in room 6, a perfect ring around the toilet, and it had slid down the drain like something alive. The card wasn't a prank. It was a warning. I stared at the rules, the uneven typewriter text, the soft, rounded edges from years of hands holding it exactly where I was holding it now. People had worked this desk before me. They'd read these same rules. They'd unplugged the phone, swept the sand, stayed behind the desk during the right window, and they'd survived their shifts. That was something. I checked the clock. 2:04 a.m. 8 minutes until 2:12. I kept my eyes on the monitor and waited. I got back to the desk and set the broom and dustpan against the wall behind me. The clock read 2:01, 11 minutes until 2:12. I pulled the monitor closer and checked all 4 feeds. Parking lot, side entrance, stairwell, hallway. Nothing moving. I cycled back to the parking lot view and stopped. The soaked person was still there. They hadn't moved from where I'd seen them before. standing maybe 20 feet from the dumpster, facing the lobby doors. Same posture, arms hanging, head tilted. The puddle around their feet looked wider now, spreading farther across the pavement. But that could have been the angle. The camera wasn't great, grainy and washed out under the lot lights. I leaned in closer to the screen. The figure didn't shift, didn't breathe, just stood there like someone had paused them mid-step and forgot to hit play. I blinked and looked again. Now they were 5 feet to the left, not walking, not stepping, just there instead of where they'd been a second ago. Same stance, same tilt. The puddle had moved with them, or maybe it was a new puddle. I couldn't tell. My chest went tight. I looked away from the monitor, counted to 3, looked back. The person was closer to my car now, maybe 10 feet from the driver's side door. Still facing the building, still dripping. I didn't see the move. The feed didn't stutter or glitch or cut out. They were just in a different spot, and my brain kept trying to fill in the gap that wasn't there. 2:03. I kept my eyes on the screen. Watched the figure standing there, motionless except for the slow spread of water beneath them. The lot was empty otherwise. No cars except mine. No wind moving trash or leaves. Just that person in the dark, and the lights making everything look flat. I glanced at the hallway feed. Empty. Stairwell feed. Empty. Side entrance feed. Closed steel door. No movement. Back to the parking lot. The figure was gone. Just pavement. Wet in patches where the puddle had been, but no person. I scanned the whole frame. Dumpster, my car, the gravel edge where the lot met the access road. Nothing. 2:04. I sat back and rubbed my face. My hands smelled like cold water and rust from the mop sink. I thought about the sand sliding down the drain, the way it moved all together instead of scattering, the way it felt heavier than it should have been. I thought about the phone ringing once and stopping. I thought about Rule 6. Remain behind the desk from 2:12 to 2:26 a.m. Watch the tide chart. 8 minutes left. The building creaked. Just the frame settling, probably. Wind off the water pushing against old wood. I heard the vending machine hum kick up a notch, then level out again. I checked the monitor one more time. All 4 feeds. Nothing. 2:07. Footsteps in the stairwell. I looked up from the screen and listened. Slow, uneven steps coming down. Someone favoring one leg or just tired. The steps hit the bottom and turned toward the lobby. A man came through the doorway. Older than me, maybe mid-40s. Tall, rangy build, close-cropped dark hair going gray at the sides. He was wearing work boots and a jacket that looked like the kind utility guys wear, dark blue with reflective strips across the chest and shoulders. His face was weathered, pale eyes, long nose. He walked stiff, like his back hurt. He stopped in front of the desk and looked at me. Didn't smile, just stood there. "Hey," I said. "I need some screws," he said. His voice was flat, practical. No humor in it. I blinked. "Screws?" "Yeah, drywall screws." He glanced at the desk, then back at me. "The ones you keep behind there." My stomach dropped a little. I looked down at the can sitting next to the register, the beat-up dented can Dorothy had given me, label half scraped off. The one she'd told me to never let out of my sight. I said. "Sure. How many do you need?" "However many you're supposed to give me." I stared at him. He stared back, expression totally neutral, waiting. I tried to keep my voice normal. "You need them for a picture frame or something?" "I don't know," he said. "I just need the screws." That bugged me. Not the request itself. Dorothy had warned me guests would ask, and Rule 7 said to provide exactly 7 if requested. But the way he said it, matter of fact. No explanation. Like he didn't know why he needed them, but knew he had to ask anyway. I pulled the can closer. "Which room are you in?" 3. I glanced at the keyboard. Room 3's key was gone. I checked the spiral notebook, flipping back a few pages until I found the entry. Ezra Kelly, checked in 2 days ago. Paid cash for 3 nights. No notes. Okay, I said. I looked back at him. You said you need drywall screws specifically? Yeah. He nodded at the can. That kind. Coincidence, I thought. Dorothy probably mentioned it when he checked in, told him we had screws at the desk if he needed any. That was it. But my hands felt cold. I asked the other woman earlier, Ezra said. She said no. I stopped. What? The woman who was here before. I asked her for the screws and she wouldn't give me any. He frowned a little, like he was trying to remember. I don't know why. I thought maybe I wasn't allowed to have them yet. Dorothy. He was talking about Dorothy. When did you ask her? I said. This afternoon, maybe 4:30 or 5. He shifted his weight, boots scraping the floor. She looked at me weird. Told me to go back to my room. I didn't say anything. Dorothy had been here when I arrived at 9:45 and she'd left maybe 20 minutes later. She would have been here at 4:30. She would have been the one at the desk if Ezra came down asking for screws. And she'd refused him. But she'd told me to give guests 3 or 4 screws when they asked. No big deal. Just for picture frames or luggage. Except Rule 7 said exactly 7, and now Ezra was here asking again, and I didn't know if Dorothy refusing him earlier meant I was supposed to refuse him now, or if the rules had changed, or if this was some kind of test. I don't know why it matters, Ezra said. He looked honestly confused. It's just screws. I reached for the can and pulled it toward me. The metal was cold under my fingers. I unscrewed the lid. It stuck a little, then gave, and set it on the desk. Inside were maybe 24 screws. Standard drywall screws, coarse thread, black finish. Nothing special about them. I could have bought the same kind at any hardware store for $3. I counted out 7, one at a time. Set them on the counter in a small pile between me and Ezra, careful to keep my hand back so I wouldn't accidentally brush his. Ezra looked at the screws, then picked them up. He didn't count them, just closed his fist around them and nodded once. Thanks, he said. He turned and walked back toward the stairwell, boots heavy on the floor. I watched him disappear through the doorway, heard his steps going up. 209. I screwed the lid back on the can and set it next to the register. My hands were shaking a little. I didn't know why. I checked the monitor, cycled through all 4 feeds. The parking lot was still empty. Side entrance still closed. Stairwell. The image stuttered, just for a second. A flicker, like a frame got dropped. And when it cleared, Ezra was there on the steps, halfway up, but something was wrong with the angle. He was too far to the right, too close to the edge of the frame. I switched to the hallway feed, empty, switched back to the stairwell. Ezra was gone. I switched to the parking lot. The soaked person was back, standing right next to my car now, hand on the driver's side door handle, facing the camera, facing me. And Ezra was there too, 5 feet away from the figure, standing completely still in the middle of the lot. I hadn't seen him leave the building, hadn't seen him walk outside. He was just there, and the soaked person was just there, and neither of them were moving. 2:11. I looked down at the tide chart taped beside the monitor. The high tide time, 2:18 a.m., was circled in thick black marker, but below it, written in smaller print, was the low tide time, 2:12 a.m. I looked at the clock, watched the minute hand click forward. 2:12. The lobby doors rattled, just once. A single hard shake, like someone had grabbed the handles and yanked, then let go, then nothing. Silence. I stayed behind the desk, hands flat on the surface, eyes on the monitor. Rule 6. I grabbed the master key off its hook. My hand was already moving before I decided to move it. The key was cold and the ring was heavier than I expected, and I was halfway around the desk before something in my head said, "Wait." I stopped. Rule 6, remain behind the desk from 2:12 to 2:26 a.m. It was 2:13 a.m., 13 minutes left. I looked at the stairwell door, empty. I looked at the master key in my hand. Then I put it on the desk and stepped back behind the counter and turned to the monitor instead. That's what I was supposed to do. Stay put. Watch the tide chart. Don't move until the window closes. The parking lot feed showed Ezra standing next to the soaked person, both of them completely still. The soaked person had its hand on my car door. Ezra had his head tilted like he was listening to something. I switched to the hallway feed. Miguel was there. He was walking down the second-floor hallway, moving slow, arms hanging at his sides. Same hoodie, same shorts. He passed room 8, then room 10. He didn't look at any of the doors, just walked. I leaned closer to the monitor. The feed was grainy and yellowish, but I could see his face. Blank, not upset anymore. Not tense, just empty. He reached the end of the hallway. Room 11 was the last door on the left. I'd stood outside it earlier when I checked upstairs for the footsteps Miguel kept hearing. The door looked identical to all the others. Plain wood, tarnished knob, little metal slot for the room number. Miguel stopped in front of it. He didn't knock, didn't reach for the handle. He just stood there for 3 seconds, maybe 4, and then he stepped forward and walked straight through. Not opened the door, not pushed it. He passed through the wood, like it wasn't there. I blinked hard and switched feeds, then switched back. The hallway was empty now, but I could see room 11's door from the angle of the camera. The deadbolt was still turned. The little brass knob on the inside of the lock was horizontal, locked position. No one had opened it. The hallway lights flickered, just once. A quick dimming and then back to normal. When they steadied, Miguel was gone from the feed completely. I checked the stairwell, empty. I checked the side entrance, closed. I checked the parking lot. Ezra and the soaked person were both still there, but now Ezra had turned slightly and was facing the building. The soaked figure hadn't moved, still had its hand on my car. I checked the hallway again. Nothing. Just 6 doors and bad lighting in the far end where room 11 sat with its deadbolt locked. The clock on the wall read 2:14 a.m. 12 minutes left. I wanted to run upstairs. I wanted to grab the master key and unlock room 11 and see what was inside. See if Miguel was in there. See if he was okay. See what the hell was happening in this building that made a man walk through a locked door. But I didn't move. I stayed behind the desk, hands flat on the surface, eyes on the monitor. That's what the laminated card said to do. Stay put from 2:12 to 2:26. Watch the tide chart. Don't leave the desk. I didn't know why. I didn't know what would happen if I broke the rule. But I'd followed the others, and nothing had gone wrong yet. The sand went down the drain. The phone got unplugged. I gave Ezra exactly 7 screws, so I stayed. The minutes dragged. I kept cycling through the feeds. Parking lot, side entrance, stairwell, hallway. Parking lot, side entrance, stairwell, hallway. Nothing changed. Ezra didn't move. The soaked person didn't move. The hallway stayed empty. At 2:18 a.m., the building creaked. A long, low groan from somewhere above me. I looked up at the ceiling. The sound moved across the lobby, slow, like weight shifting on old beams. High tide. I looked at the tide chart taped beside the monitor. The 2:18 a.m. marking was circled in thick black marker. High tide, right now. The groan faded. The building went quiet again. 2:19 a.m. 7 minutes left. I checked the parking lot feed. The soaked person had moved. It was closer to the building now, halfway between my car and the front doors. Ezra was still in the lot, but further back, near the dumpster. I hadn't seen either of them walk. They just relocated. The soaked person's head was tilted up now, looking at the camera, looking at me. I could see its face better from this angle. Pale, slick, eyes open, but wrong, too wide. No blinking. 2:21 a.m. The lobby felt smaller. The air felt thicker. I kept my hands on the desk and my eyes on the monitor, and I counted the seconds in my head, because looking at the clock made time move slower. 2:23 a.m. The hallway feed flickered again. For half a second I thought I saw someone standing outside room 11. A shadow, taller than Miguel, but when the feed steadied, the hallway was empty again. 2:25 a.m. 1 minute left. I watched the clock. Watched the second hand crawl. 50 seconds. 40. 30. At exactly 2:26 a.m., the lobby doors clicked. A single sharp metallic sound, like a deadbolt sliding open, like someone had just unlocked them from the outside. But no one was at the doors. I could see them through the glass. Empty steps. Empty gravel lot beyond. I looked at the monitor. The soaked person was pressed against the glass now. Face close. Right up against the door. Nose touching. Hands flat on either side of its head. It was staring in. Staring at me. I could see the details now. The skin wasn't just wet. It was covered in grains of sand, stuck to the cheeks, the forehead, the neck, tiny dark specks clinging to the water that ran down its face. Its mouth was open, just slightly. I could see teeth, pale gums. I stepped back from the desk. The unplugged phone rang. One sharp ring, then silence. The phone was still unplugged. I could see the cord sitting on the desk where I'd left it, not connected to anything, but it had rung, clear and loud. The same sound as before. I stared at it. The old beige receiver sitting in its cradle, the coiled cord hanging loose. I was so tired. Tired of the rules. Tired of the laminated card. Tired of doing exactly what I was told without understanding why. Tired of watching people vanish and reappear and walk through locked doors while I sat behind a desk and did nothing. I picked up the receiver. Static at first, wet crackling, then sounds underneath, breathing maybe, or something close to breathing, strained, thick, like someone trying to speak through water. I pressed the phone to my ear and waited. The sounds shifted, formed something close to words, slow, distorted. I couldn't make out individual syllables, but I understood anyway. The meaning pushed through the static and into my head, and I just knew. Room 11 has checked in. The 7 screws need to be returned before the tide turns. I looked at the tide chart. Low tide was listed at 2:12 a.m. in small print, but that had already passed. The next low tide wouldn't be for hours, maybe 6 a.m., maybe later. The wet sounds continued, urgent now, insistent, before the tide turns. I put the phone down. My hand was shaking again. Ezra had taken the 7 screws. I'd counted them out and put them on the counter, and he'd taken all 7 and walked back toward the stairwell. Then he'd appeared in the parking lot, next to the soaked person. The soaked person who was now pressed against the glass with sand stuck to its skin. The only 7 screws that mattered. I looked at the dented can sitting next to the register. It still had screws inside. Maybe 20 left. But those weren't the right ones. The 7 I'd given Ezra were the ones that mattered. The ones Dorothy had told me to keep behind the desk. The ones Rule 7 said to provide if requested. Exactly 7. And now Room 11 wanted them back. I could wait for Dorothy. Call her. Tell her what happened. Let her fix it. But the tide chart didn't care about Dorothy. The tide was already turning. High tide at 2:18, low tide coming, and Room 11 had checked in. I grabbed the can of screws, then I ran for the stairs. I took the stairs 2 at a time, the can of screws rattling in my grip. The hallway upstairs was still empty. The lights flickered once when I reached the top, but steadied. Room 3 was 4th on the left. I knocked first. Stupid, probably, but I did it anyway. No answer. The door was unlocked. I turned the handle and pushed it open. The room was empty. Not empty like someone had just stepped out. Empty like no one had been there at all. The bed was still made, corners tucked tight, the kind of hospital precision Dorothy must have done during turnover. The bathroom light was off. I flipped it on. Sink dry, toilet clean. No towels on the floor, no soap moved, no condensation on the mirror. Ezra Kelly had checked in 2 days ago, paid cash for 3 nights. I'd seen it in the notebook, but his room looked like a display. I backed out and pulled the door shut. My hand was still shaking around the screw can. I turned toward the end of the hall. Room 11 was down there on the left. Last door. The deadbolt was still horizontal through the little window in the strike plate. I started walking. The air changed about halfway down, got colder. Not draft cold, thick cold, the kind that sits in your chest and doesn't move. I could see my breath by the time I reached the second to last door. That's when I saw them. 7 screws, laid out in a perfect straight line on the carpet directly in front of room 11's door. Damp. Dark spots spreading into the fibers under each one. I stopped. They were the ones I'd given Ezra. Had to be. Same size, same dull silver finish. Placed deliberately, evenly spaced, like someone had used a ruler. I looked back down the hallway. Still empty. The stairwell door was closed. I didn't want to touch them. I went back to the service closet and grabbed the first towel I saw, a rough white one with a brown stain along the edge. I folded it twice and crouched in front of the screws, scooping them up through the fabric without letting my skin make contact. They felt heavier than they should have. The dampness soaked through the towel almost immediately, cold and slick. I stood and turned back toward room 11. The air was worse now, colder, wet. I could taste salt. The deadbolt moved. I watched it happen, slow, deliberate. The horizontal bar rotated counterclockwise inside the strike plate, pulling back into the housing with a soft metallic scrape. The latch shifted next. I heard the bolt tongue slide free of the strike plate. The door didn't open, but it settled in the frame differently, loose, ready, like it was inviting me. I looked down at the towel in my hand, the 7 screws bundled inside, still damp and cold. Then I looked at the gap under the door. Maybe an inch. Enough. I crouched and started to unwrap the towel. The plan was simple. Slide them under. Get rid of them. Back away. I got the first screw to the threshold when I heard footsteps behind me. Slow. Uneven. The same rhythm I'd heard on the monitor. I turned my head. Amy Buck was walking toward me from the stairwell end of the hall. Same blank expression Miguel had worn. Arms hanging, eyes open but not focused on anything. She was barefoot, wearing a t-shirt and loose pants, hair loose around her shoulders. She didn't react to me, didn't slow down or speed up, just kept walking. I looked back at the door, at the screws, at the gap underneath. That's when I got it. They wanted me here. Wanted me crouched at the threshold with something in my hands, exposed, distracted. The screws weren't something I needed to return. They were bait. I dropped lower, pressed my palm flat against the carpet, and drove the first screw down hard into the door jamb where it met the floor. The tip punched through the worn fibers and bit into wood. I pulled the master key off my belt loop and used the flat metal edge of the bow to hammer it deeper, angling it so the threads caught the frame and the door's bottom edge both. Amy was 10 feet away. I grabbed the second screw and drove it in next to the first, then the third. The key bent under the pressure but held. Amy was 5 feet away. 4th screw. 5th. I was jamming them in fast now, not caring about angle or depth, just forcing them down through the carpet into the wood, creating a crude barrier that locked the door's edge to the frame. Amy collided with me. She didn't stop, didn't grab or push, just kept moving forward like I wasn't there, her shoulder hitting mine, her weight knocking me sideways. I lost my grip on the 6th screw, but caught myself with one hand on the wall. She walked straight into the door, hit it like it was glass, face first. The whole door shuddered in the frame but didn't open. The screws held. Amy crumpled, dropped straight down onto her knees, then forward onto her hands, head hanging. Something inside room 11 made a sound. High, harsh. Not a voice, not wind, something between the two. It vibrated through the wood, through the floor, up into my teeth. Then it cut off. Silence. I stayed pressed against the wall, breathing hard, the last screw still in my hand. Amy didn't move for maybe 10 seconds. Then her shoulders shifted. Her head came up slowly. She blinked. "What?" Her voice cracked. She blinked again, looked down at her hands on the carpet, then up at me. "Where?" I didn't answer. I grabbed her arm and pulled her to her feet. She stumbled but didn't resist. The wet, rotting smell that had been thick in the air was fading. Not gone, just easing back. I got her to room 6. Miguel's old room. The door was unlocked. I guided her inside, sat her on the edge of the bed, and locked the door from the inside using the push button on the handle. Then I grabbed the 2 towels from the bathroom and the unopened water bottle from the bedside table and set them next to her. "Stay here," I said. She nodded, still blinking, still confused. I didn't try to explain. I left and pulled the door shut, heard the lock catch. Back at room 11, I crouched again. The 6 screws I'd driven in were holding, but the gap between door and frame was still flexing slightly when I pressed my palm against the wood. Not enough. I took the 7th screw and positioned it directly over the strike plate, where the deadbolt would normally slide through. I drove it in at an angle using the master key again, forcing the threads through the thin metal plate and into the jamb behind it. The tip bent, but the screw sank deep enough to pin the bolt mechanism. It wouldn't cycle now, couldn't retract or extend. The door was sealed. I stood and backed away. The hallway was quiet. The carpet around the threshold was torn where I'd punched the screws through. Fibers pulled up in rough circles, backing exposed. I went back downstairs and sat behind the desk. Didn't check the monitor, didn't write anything in the notebook. Just waited. The next half hour passed in silence. The vending machine hummed. The building creaked. The wet smell faded completely by 3:15. At 6:30, gravel crunched outside. Dorothy's car pulled into the lot. I watched through the glass as she got out, same button-up and tight bun, and walked to the door. I unlocked it and let her in. She looked at me, then at the desk, then back at me. "Upstairs," I said. She went up without a word. I heard her footsteps in the hallway, heard them stop. Silence for maybe 2 minutes. Then she came back down. She didn't ask questions, didn't say anything about the torn carpet or the jammed lock or the screws I'd left embedded in the wood. She walked behind the desk, opened the register, and counted out bills. More than 200, maybe 4, maybe 5. She folded them once and held them out. "You're done," she said. I took the cash. I pulled the master key off my belt loop and set it on the desk next to the dented can of screws. Dorothy looked at both but didn't touch them. I walked out. Didn't check on Amy. Didn't look at the monitor. Didn't ask about Miguel or Ezra or room 11. I got in my car and drove. Not south back toward Yashatz. West first to the junction, then east on Highway 20 toward Eugene. Inland. Away from the coast. The sun was coming up behind me, orange light filling the rearview mirror. I kept my eyes forward. I stayed alive, kept the ocean behind me. I was jobless. Mom still had Stephanie Maldonado calling 6 days a week. The $1,100 was still there. But I was driving inland, and I wasn't going back.